I'm a 58-year-old man, and I've been married to my wife Diana, who's 56, for 25 years. For the most part, I've always believed our marriage was rock solid. We communicate openly, treat each other with respect, and together we've built a life that feels steady and comfortable. But there's always been one crack in the foundation, and that crack is her younger sister, Wendy, who's now 52. She's been a constant source of friction, and a recent situation really pushed things to a breaking point. I honestly need to know if my reaction here is out of line. Diana and I first met in our early 30s. At that point, I was already a few years into my career as an accountant. I like that job because it's structured and predictable. Numbers have a way of making sense that people sometimes don't. Diana was, and still is, an elementary school teacher. She's got the patience of a saint, which is probably why she not only puts up with me but also with her sister Wendy. Our upbringings had similarities, but also some big differences. My parents were down-to-earth, practical folks. They weren't wealthy by any stretch, but they managed money with discipline and responsibility. From the time I was a kid, I remember my dad reminding me, "Money doesn't grow on trees, son," every time I asked for something unnecessary. He never said it harshly, but it drilled into me the value of hard work and financial responsibility. Through years of scrimping and saving, my parents were able to buy a small, modest lake cottage. It wasn't fancy, but it was their dream home, and they achieved it by planning carefully and sticking to their means. Diana's family, on the other hand, lived in a completely different financial reality. Her parents, both of whom have since passed, were constantly chasing some big get-rich-quick scheme. They'd jump into risky investments, start businesses they knew nothing about, and treat money like it was endless. Debt was normal in their household. They were always scrambling to cover one bill by borrowing for another. That kind of instability left a mark on Diana and Wendy, and unfortunately, Wendy ended up inheriting every one of her parents' worst money habits without any of the redeeming qualities. Wendy's never been able to hold a steady job for more than a few months. She bounces from one short-term gig to another, always convinced she's on the verge of some big success. In her head, she's destined to be a famous chef, a fashion designer, or a powerful businesswoman. Pick a dream, and at some point Wendy's claimed it. But reality has never matched the fantasy. She doesn't have the discipline, work ethic, or even the basic common sense to follow through. Diana, thankfully, is nothing like her sister. She's responsible, grounded, and thoughtful. From the beginning of our marriage, we've been on the same page financially. We set up a joint account for our shared expenses and kept separate accounts for personal spending. That system has worked beautifully for 25 years. It gave us both independence while still covering everything that mattered. Because of it, we've been able to save diligently, live securely, and stay on track for a comfortable retirement. For me, that sense of financial security is priceless, and I know it comes directly from the lessons my parents instilled in me. But Wendy, she's always been the wild card. Over the years, Diana has loaned her sister money more times than I can count. At first, it was small amounts, but those emergencies eventually turned into bigger and bigger sums. The story never changes. Wendy's just in a temporary bind. She only needs a little help to get back on her feet, and she swears she'll pay it back as soon as possible. But as soon as possible never comes. By my best guess, Diana has given her thousands of dollars over the past 20 years, and if she's seen even a few hundred back, I'd be shocked. I've done my best to be patient about it. I know family means the world to Diana, and I don't want to be the guy who flat out forbids her from helping. But I've repeatedly encouraged her, sometimes gently, sometimes more firmly, to start setting some boundaries. I've pointed out that by constantly bailing Wendy out, she isn't actually helping her, she's just enabling the same destructive cycle to continue. The first time Wendy's mess dragged me directly into the middle of it was about 10 years ago. Out of nowhere, she announced she was going to start a luxury pet grooming business. The problem? Wendy didn't own a pet, had zero training in animal care, and had no experience running any kind of business. Still, she was convinced this was her golden ticket to wealth. To get it off the ground, she needed a large loan, and she asked Diana to co-sign. Diana was actually considering it. She wanted to support her sister, to give her the chance to finally prove herself. That's when I had to step in, hard. I explained that co-signing meant we'd be legally responsible for the entire debt if Wendy inevitably defaulted. With her history, that seemed like a near certainty. I laid out every possible consequence so Diana could see how risky it was. It wasn't an easy conversation. Diana was angry, said I was being unsupportive, and told me I didn't understand what loyalty to family meant. She argued that Wendy just needed a break, one good opportunity to turn things around. I reminded her that Wendy had been given plenty of breaks already, and none had worked out. We went back and forth for days. Eventually, Diana saw my point, even if it hurt. She told Wendy she couldn't co-sign. As expected, Wendy went nuclear. She accused me of being controlling, manipulative, and of deliberately trying to sabotage her dreams. She guilt-tripped Diana, saying I didn't believe in her and that Diana was choosing her husband over her sister. And then, just as I predicted, the pet grooming business completely collapsed within 6 months. Wendy was left buried in debt, and of course, she never apologized to either of us. She simply shrugged it off and moved right along to her next big idea. Fast forward to about 6 months ago, my uncle, my dad's brother, passed away. He'd been a lifelong bachelor, a talented musician, and one of the kindest people I knew. In his will, he left me his most cherished possessions, a collection of vintage guitars. These weren't just old instruments, they were rare, collectible pieces, some dating back to the 1960s. There was a beautiful old Gibson acoustic, a classic Fender Telecaster, and the crown jewel, a 1967 Fender Stratocaster that was in pristine condition. To me, these guitars were priceless, not because of their monetary value but because of what they represented. As a kid, I'd sit in my uncle's living room, completely mesmerized by the music he could make with those guitars. He'd even let me strum a few chords, patiently guiding my hands, even though I had no real musical talent. When I inherited the collection, I knew I had to protect it. I turned our spare room into a little home music studio. I had a reinforced door with multiple locks installed, set up a high-quality security system, and even added humidity control so the instruments would stay in perfect condition. That room became sacred to me. I rarely let anyone inside, not even Diana. It wasn't about trust, it was about how precious those guitars were. I wanted to minimize any chance of damage or, worse, theft. About 6 months ago, Wendy's life fell apart again, nothing new there. She had just been fired from her latest job, this time claiming it was because her manager had it out for her. But knowing Wendy like I do, that probably meant she'd been either insubordinate, unreliable, or both. Not long after, she was staring down eviction from her apartment. And, as always, when things got bad, she ran straight to Diana. Diana, being the bleeding heart that she is, offered Wendy a place to stay. She told her she could stay in our guest room for a couple of weeks until she figured things out. The moment I heard it, my gut screamed this was a mistake. I knew it was going to cause problems. But Diana was determined to help her sister, and I didn't want to be the husband who flat out said no. So I agreed reluctantly, but not without setting rules. I sat them both down, looked Wendy in the eye, and spelled everything out clearly. She could use the guest room. She had to respect our privacy. Borrowing money was completely off the table. And the biggest rule of all in my office, my music room, was absolutely off limits. I explained that it contained rare, valuable guitars, pieces that could never be replaced. I told her I wouldn't tolerate any violation of that boundary. Wendy smiled, promised she understood, and swore she'd respect the rules. For the first couple of weeks, things actually went smoother than I expected. Wendy mostly stayed in the guest room, scrolling on her phone or binge-watching TV. She made a few half-hearted attempts at looking for a job, but, surprise surprise, nothing came of it. I avoided her whenever possible, not because I was trying to be rude, but because I simply didn't trust her. Then one afternoon, everything changed. I came home early from work, not feeling great. I had a pounding headache and just wanted to crawl into bed. As I walked upstairs, I passed by my office and froze. From inside, I could hear the faint sound of strumming. My heart sank. I knew instantly. I opened the door, and there she was. Wendy. Standing in the middle of my office, holding my 1967 Fender Stratocaster, the most valuable guitar in my entire collection. She was fumbling around, trying to play it, and I can't even explain the surge of anger that hit me in that moment. I kept my voice controlled, but it was shaking. Wendy, I said, what on earth do you think you're doing? She nearly dropped the guitar, startled. I was just looking at it, she stammered. It's so beautiful, I just wanted to admire it. Admire it? I snapped, my voice rising. You were playing it. And you're in my office. The one place I told you was completely off limits. She tried to brush it off. I wasn't going to hurt it, I just wanted to see it up close. Put it down, I cut her off. Put it down right now. And get out of my office. Her cheeks went red as she set the guitar back on its stand. She couldn't even look at me. I locked the door behind her as soon as she left and immediately inspected every single guitar. Thankfully, there wasn't a scratch on them, but I was shaking with anger. She had crossed a line I never thought she would. That night, I told Diana what happened. She apologized over and over, promised she'd talk to Wendy, and swore nothing like that would ever happen again. A week later, I had to travel for work. It was just a quick 3-day trip, but I was nervous about leaving. Before I left, I reminded Diana again, Wendy was never to go near my office. Diana reassured me she understood and would make sure of it. When I got back, Things seemed normal at first. Diana greeted me with a smile, asked about my trip, told me about her week at school. But I could tell something was off. She was avoiding eye contact, fidgeting. Her usual cheerful demeanor just wasn't there. After dinner, she finally broke down and told me the truth. While I was away, Wendy had come to her with another one of her sob stories. She said she'd been offered a chance to play music at some local bar and needed a guitar. She asked Diana if she could borrow one of mine. And Diana, feeling guilty about the last incident, actually said yes. But, according to her, she only gave Wendy permission to borrow the least valuable guitar in my collection, an acoustic I rarely touched. She said she made it clear, the Stratocaster and the electrics were completely off limits. The moment she told me this, I bolted upstairs to my office. The acoustic was gone, just like she'd said. But so was the Stratocaster. The case was empty. My heart dropped. She took the Stratocaster, didn't she? I asked. Diana burst into tears. She admitted Wendy had decided the acoustic wasn't good enough and had taken the Stratocaster too. Diana said she hadn't realized until Wendy was already gone. She tried calling her to bring it back, but Wendy refused, promising she'd return it in perfect condition. I called Wendy myself, over and over. Straight to voicemail. I left furious messages, telling her to return the guitars immediately or I'd call the police. Hours turned into days. Days turned into more than a week. Still no word. Diana was beside herself, crying constantly, apologizing nonstop, and desperately trying to reach her sister. But I was past the point of sympathy. After almost 10 days, Wendy finally called Diana back. And her excuse? She said she'd sold the guitars. Claimed she was facing an emergency, needed rent money, and had no choice. She swore she planned to buy them back eventually, she just needed more time. She even had the audacity to act like she was the victim in all of this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The entitlement, the shamelessness, it was staggering. I told her flat out this wasn't just wrong, it was theft. I said she needed to return those guitars or pay me their full market value. And just the Stratocaster alone was worth well into 5 figures. For the first time, Diana finally seemed to grasp how serious this was. She admitted Wendy had gone too far. She pleaded with her sister, begged her, but Wendy wouldn't budge. Instead, she turned it around, accusing me of being materialistic, saying I cared more about a couple of old guitars than her struggles. She even tried guilting Diana, saying she should support her family instead of siding with me. That's when I realized this wasn't about the guitars anymore. It was about trust, respect, and boundaries. I told Diana that since she had given Wendy permission to take the acoustic, whether she meant for things to escalate or not, she needed to replace it. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. She had broken my trust, and she needed to take responsibility. As for the Stratocaster, I put most of the blame on Wendy. But I also told Diana that because she'd allowed the situation to start, she needed to do everything possible to either get it back or make sure Wendy paid me back. And if Wendy refused, I was ready to file a police report and even take her to court if I had to. Diana was devastated. Diana and I have been going in circles about this for weeks now. She insists she doesn't have that kind of money lying around, that paying me back would drain her personal savings and put a major strain on our finances. She says I'm being unfair, that I'm choosing material possessions over family. I keep telling her it isn't about money, it's about trust, but the arguments just keep happening. The guitars are still gone, Wendy hasn't made any effort to fix what she did, and the tension between Diana and me has only gotten worse. I do understand Diana thought she was helping her sister and that she felt stuck in a tough spot. But from where I'm standing, she completely disregarded my feelings and my very clear boundaries. So, Reddit, that's where I'm torn. Am I being unreasonable for refusing to just swallow this loss and move on? These guitars weren't just expensive, they carried deep sentimental value. I love my wife, but I also feel like if I don't stand up for myself and protect what matters to me, then where does that leave us? Update 1: I honestly didn't expect the amount of feedback I got on my original post. The outpouring of advice and support was overwhelming, and I can't tell you how validating it felt. Reading through your comments, I realized I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. So many of you pointed out what I hadn't wanted to admit, that yes, Wendy is absolutely the main problem here, but Diana bears responsibility too. In my anger over the theft, I had focused everything on Wendy and hadn't fully processed Diana's role in enabling her. Reading people stress how important trust and boundaries are in a marriage made me look at things differently. I realized a lot of my anger needed to be directed inward to our marriage, not just outward at Wendy. Last night, I had a long, tough talk with Diana. Thankfully it didn't turn into shouting, but it was emotional. I apologized for acting like this was only Wendy's fault and acknowledged that Diana's choices played a huge part too. I told her I understood her intentions, that she was trying to support her sister, that it came from a place of love, but I also explained just how deeply her actions hurt me. I reminded her of the sentimental weight those guitars carried. Yes, they had a high monetary value, but for me, it was about the memories and my connection to my late uncle. I told her that by letting Wendy take one, she wasn't just undermining me, she was breaking a core trust in our marriage. This time, Diana really listened. She apologized again, and she admitted something I'd long suspected, that she's been enabling Wendy for years out of guilt, family loyalty, and some naive hope that one day Wendy would change. She confessed she's always felt like the responsible one in her family, the one who had to fix everything. And she admitted that letting Wendy take one of my guitars, after I had made it crystal clear that it was off limits, was a massive breach of trust. From there, we started talking about what to do moving forward. The reality is Diana doesn't have anywhere near enough in her savings to replace the Stratocaster. That guitar alone is worth a small fortune. But she does have enough to cover the acoustic. So, here's the plan we came up with. 1. Diana will use her personal savings to buy me a replacement acoustic of similar quality and value. It won't be identical, but it's something. 2. We're giving Wendy one last chance. She has exactly 1 week to either return the Stratocaster in perfect condition or pay us the amount she sold it for, with proof. I don't have much faith, but I figured we should at least offer. 3. If Wendy ignores this, we're moving forward with legal action. A lot of you suggested small claims court, and after talking it over, that's the route we'll take. We're consulting a lawyer to make sure everything is handled properly. The idea of suing my sister-in-law makes me sick, but at this point, it feels necessary. 4. Diana and I also agreed we need marriage counseling. This whole ordeal has dug up some very deep problems, not just about Wendy, but about how we handle conflict as a couple. We've already booked our first session. 5. Lastly, boundaries. We can't go back in time, but we can make sure this never happens again. From here on out, strict lines need to be drawn. This doesn't magically bring my Stratocaster back or erase the hurt, but it feels like a start. Update 2. 1 month later. It's been a month since that last update, and while some progress has been made, other things have gotten worse. The deadline we gave Wendy came and went. No guitar. No money. No explanation. She ignored our calls completely. Diana eventually managed to reach her after days of trying. According to her, the conversation was classic Wendy, nothing but excuses and manipulation. She claimed the guitar was at a friend's house in storage and that she couldn't get to it right now. She promised vaguely to work something out, but it was obvious she had no intention of fixing this. So, we followed through with our plan. We filed the paperwork. Wendy was officially served with a small claims lawsuit. Our lawyer told us we had a solid case, though he also warned us that even if we won, actually collecting the money could be a nightmare. Still, it was the principle. When Wendy found out, she exploded. She called Diana in tears, screaming, accusing us of being cruel and heartless. She claimed she didn't know the guitar was worth that much and that we were overreacting, acting like millionaires, which, for the record, we're not. But here's where I give Diana credit. For once, she didn't cave. She didn't apologize or try to smooth things over. She stood firm. She told Wendy this was a direct consequence of her actions, that she had stolen from us, and that she needed to take responsibility. Honestly, that was huge for her. The court date was scheduled for last week. I was a nervous wreck. I've never been involved in any legal case before, and preparing everything, my testimony, the documentation, was exhausting. When the day came, Diana and I sat in the courtroom, waiting. And guess what? Wendy didn't even show up. The judge waited the required time, reviewed our evidence, listened to my testimony, and then ruled in our favor by default. We were awarded the full amount, the estimated market value of the Stratocaster plus the cost of the acoustic Diana had already replaced. Of course, winning a judgment doesn't mean we'll actually see the money. Our lawyer reminded us that collecting from Wendy will likely be nearly impossible. She has no steady job, no property, no assets. I'm not holding my breath. But honestly, at this point, it's more about the principle than the payout. It's about proving to both Diana and myself that this behavior isn't acceptable. On the brighter side, counseling has been going really well. It's not easy, sometimes it's painful, but it's been eye-opening. Diana is starting to recognize the codependent patterns she's had with her sister all her life. She's realizing that helping Wendy usually just means enabling her. And I'm learning how to be more patient and to understand the pressure Diana's been under with her family since childhood. The biggest step? Diana agreed with me on one very firm rule. Wendy is no longer welcome in our home. That was a hard decision for her, but she knows it's necessary. I need to feel safe in my own house, and I can't do that with Wendy anywhere near it. It's sad, yes. But sometimes the only way forward is drawing a line in the sand.